We were just two friends. One night, one hotel room, one bed. No big deal. Or at least, that's what we told ourselves. We were broke, exhausted. We laughed it off at check-in. One bed? Whatever. But then he stepped out of the bathroom, wearing nothing but tight gray briefs. And when he dropped onto the bed like it was the most normal thing in the world, something shifted. The air got heavier. My thoughts drifted somewhere I didn't want them to go. I turned off the lights, trying to ignore it. But his body was so close. His warmth, his breathing, that silence, thick with tension. Before I tell you what really happened that night, let's rewind. We'd been on the road for 10 hours straight by the time we pulled into the hotel parking lot. Our clothes clung to us with sweat. The car reeked of fast food and old air freshener. My back felt like it had snapped in half. But none of that mattered. We were finally out of the car. "Dude," William groaned, stretching as he slammed his door. "If I don't lie down in the next 10 minutes, I'm crashing on the sidewalk." I laughed, slinging my backpack over my shoulder. "You complain more than you breathe." "Drive? That's because you hog the aux and blast your sad boy playlists," he smirked. "I'm emotionally exhausted." That smile, the one that always looked a little smug, a little too effortless. That was William, tall, tanned, jawline like it was carved out of stone. And, tragically, totally straight. We'd been best friends since sophomore year of college. Now, 2 years out, nothing had changed. Except me. Somewhere along the line, this friendship stopped feeling like just friendship. It became something I didn't know how to name, not without choking on the words. We stumbled into the hotel lobby half asleep. The woman at the desk didn't even glance up as she slid the keycard toward us. Room 207. One bed. I blinked. One bed? She pointed to the form William had filled out. "That's what you booked." I turned to him. "Seriously?" He shrugged. "It was cheaper. Thought it'd be 2 queens. Guess not. We're grown. We'll survive." I forced a laugh. "Yeah, of course." But inside I was spiraling. The room wasn't awful. Beige walls, clean sheets, one king-sized bed that suddenly felt like a trap. I dropped my bag on the far side like it was neutral ground. William kicked off his shoes, tossed his hoodie on a chair, and collapsed onto the mattress like it belonged to him. "Grown. This," he mumbled, "is heaven." I sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to look at him for too long. His shirt had ridden up, exposing a narrow line of toned skin just above his waistband. I snapped my eyes away. "I'm gonna shower," I said, grabbing my toiletry bag. "Leave me some hot water, lover boy," he called after me, laughing. I shut the door behind me and exhaled. The water helped drown out the noise in my head, but only for a little while. When I stepped out, towel wrapped around my waist, he was gone from the bed. Then the bathroom door swung open behind me. And there he was, hair wet, skin still damp, wearing nothing but tight, gray boxer briefs. "Hope you don't mind," he said casually. "Forgot to pack sleep shorts." My mouth opened, then closed. He climbed into bed, pulled the blanket up to his waist, and looked over at me like this was the most normal thing in the world. "You good?" he asked. I nodded, a little too fast. "Yeah, totally." I climbed into bed like I was stepping into a minefield. The lights went out. And then, nothing. Just the sound of his breathing, and the heat radiating off his body, inches from mine. The warmth of him lingered beside me, the scent of clean skin and soap hanging in the air. Something deeper, something undeniably him, wrapped around my senses. My body was wide awake, no matter how hard I tried to pretend otherwise. I shut my eyes, willing myself to focus on anything else but the moment. Then the bed shifted. He moved, just a little closer, and I felt everything. Sleep was impossible. The room was quiet, but my thoughts were screaming. The air felt too still, too heavy, and William was so close. His breathing had settled into a slow, steady rhythm. I could almost feel it through the mattress. Every time he moved, the sheets whispered. Every exhale made the space between us feel smaller. I stared at the ceiling, arms stiff at my sides, my whole body tense, like I was bracing for something I knew I wasn't supposed to want. Maybe it was all in my head. He hadn't said anything, hadn't acted any different. Maybe he was just tired, like always. Maybe I was the only one making this weird. I squeezed my eyes shut, desperate for sleep. But my mind kept flashing, him stretching, the way his back arched, the way those boxers hugged his hips, the sound of his laugh echoing off the shower tiles. And then he moved again. This time he shifted closer. I felt it. His leg brushed against mine under the blanket. Not hard, not accidental, and he didn't pull away. My heart thundered. Was he awake? I stayed completely still, barely breathing. Then his foot touched mine. Light, intentional. I turned my head slowly, carefully. In the dark, I could just make out the shape of his face. His eyes were closed, but his body had turned toward mine. Our knees touched now. Barely. But it was enough. Enough to drive me insane. "William," I whispered, not even sure if I wanted him to hear me. No answer. Was he pretending? I slowly turned onto my side to face him. "William, are you awake?" This time his eyes opened slightly, just a sliver. His voice came out low, rough with sleep. "Couldn't sleep." I swallowed hard. "Yeah, me neither." We stared at each other, trapped in that strange, quiet space between strangers and something more. The kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Then he reached out slowly. His fingers brushed along my wrist. The same wrist he'd touched once before, months ago in the yard when we were just messing around. Back then I thought it meant nothing. Now I wasn't so sure. "I don't know what this is," he said softly, his hand still hovering near mine. "But I think about it a lot." My chest ached. I wanted to ask him what he meant. I wanted to scream me too. But all I could manage was, "Then why didn't you say anything?" He looked down. "Because I didn't know if you felt it too." I stared at him, heart pounding. "William, I've felt it for a long time." He looked up at me again, and for one breathless moment, there was no hesitation, no fear, no pretending. Just us. "I was scared it would mess everything up," he said. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, me too. But tonight, lying here, I don't want to pretend anymore." "Me neither." So I leaned forward. Not far, just enough for our foreheads to touch. His breath hitched, and just as I was about to say something real, the hotel room phone rang. Loud, sharp, jarring. We both jumped. He pulled back quickly. I reached for the phone, heart racing. "Hello?" It was the front desk. "Sorry to disturb you, sir. There's been a booking error. You're scheduled to switch rooms. We'll need you to check out first thing in the morning." I mumbled something in response and hung up. When I turned around, William was already sitting up, breathing hard. The moment was gone. He rubbed his hands over his face. "We should get some sleep." "Yeah," I whispered, already missing how close we'd been. We laid back down. This time there was space between us. I didn't close my eyes, because something had changed, and tomorrow something would have to give. I woke before the sun. A faint strip of light crept across the floor through the gap in the curtains. The silence felt even heavier than it had last night. My body was stiff from barely sleeping. My mind hadn't stopped racing since the moment William pulled away. He was still asleep, his back to me now, one arm slung over the pillow. The blanket had slipped down to his waist. The curve of his bare shoulder was visible, and the light made his skin look warm, like he wasn't part of this cold, awkward morning, like nothing had changed, but everything had. I replayed his words in my head. I don't know what this is, but I think about it a lot. Had that really happened, or had the phone call shattered it into something we'd pretend never existed? He stirred, shifting under the sheets. His head turned slightly. I watched his eyes blink open, slow and unfocused. When they landed on me, something flickered. Recognition. Then hesitation. "Hey," he said, his voice still rough. "Hey," I whispered back. We stayed like that, still and silent, like if we moved too quickly, we'd break whatever fragile truth had passed between us. "I didn't dream it, right?" I asked. William didn't answer at first. He rolled onto his back, staring up at the ceiling. "No, you didn't." Silence again, heavy and full of everything we weren't saying. I sat up, rubbing the back of my neck. "You kind of shut down last night." He exhaled. "Yeah, sorry." "You don't have to be sorry," I said. I need to know what that was, because I can't go back to pretending nothing's changed." William sat up too, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. His voice was low but steady. "It scared the hell out of me," he said. "I didn't expect to feel any of that. Not with you, not like that." He looked at me, really looked at me, and then he smiled. Not the usual teasing grin I'd seen 100 times before. This one was smaller, softer, raw, like, for once, he wasn't trying to be anyone but himself. "I don't know," he said, "but I don't want to run from it either." I stared at him, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone in this. The phone call, the panic, the distance that had hovered between us, none of it erased the truth. If anything, it brought it into sharper focus. He ran a hand through his hair. "What time do we have to check out?" I glanced at the clock. 20 minutes. We both stood up, starting to gather our things. We didn't speak, but the silence had changed. It wasn't awkward anymore. It buzzed with something electric, like a fuse had just been lit. He pulled his shirt over his head, and I tried not to watch. Of course, I watched, and he caught me, but he didn't look away. Instead, he stepped closer and let his hand brush against my waist, just for a second, skin to skin. Barely a touch, but it lit a fire under my skin. He leaned in close enough that his breath warmed my ear. "Can I tell you something?" "Yeah," I whispered. "I don't know what I want yet," he said quietly, "but I know I want to keep finding out with you." I nodded. Words wouldn't come. None were big enough. We finished packing, grabbed our bags, and left the room behind. But walking down that hallway side by side, it felt like we hadn't left everything in that room. Something had followed us out. Something just beginning. Later that afternoon, we stopped for gas at a random station, miles from anywhere. William stood beside me, casually scrolling on his phone. Then, out of nowhere, he looked up, leaned in, and whispered, "Last night wasn't the last time." We didn't say much after that, but the silence wasn't empty. It was full, heavy with things neither of us were ready to say out loud, the kind of silence that hums just beneath the surface. William kept the music low, his fingers tapping along the steering wheel. His sunglasses hid his eyes. I watched the road, but my thoughts were elsewhere, spiraling around the same 6 words. Last night wasn't the last time. Hours later, we arrived at our next stop, a quiet, a little Airbnb on the edge of a sleepy town. A friend of William's owned it and had offered it for the night. It wasn't fancy. 1 bedroom, 1 bed. Again, we stood in the doorway, bags in hand, both staring at the room. "Does this feel familiar?" I asked, trying to cut the tension. William glanced at me, a slow smirk forming. "Bit of déjà vu." We dropped our stuff. He kicked off his shoes, and I went to the window, pretending to admire the view while trying to slow my pulse. But it was no use. The energy between us was stronger now, harder to ignore. "I'm going to shower," he said. I nodded. "Cool." But just before he turned away, he paused and looked back at me. "You okay?" I held his gaze. "Are you?" His shoulders tensed, then softened. "Not really," he admitted, "but I want to be." When the bathroom door closed behind him, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. The silence returned, but it was heavier now. It pressed on my chest. By the time I heard the water stop, my palms were sweating. Then the door opened. He stepped out, towel around his waist, hair dripping. My breath caught. "Your turn," he said, his voice lower than usual. But I couldn't move. I looked at him. He looked at me. And something shifted. He dropped the towel. No hesitation, no fear. Just him, standing there, bare, open, like he wasn't running anymore. I rose slowly, my legs barely working. I took a step, then another. We met in the center of the room. No words, none needed. He reached out, slid his hand behind my neck, and pulled me in so close I could feel his heartbeat against mine. And then he kissed me. It wasn't soft. It wasn't careful. It was urgent, messy, real. Everything we hadn't said exploding in that kiss. Every glance, every held breath. Every moment we'd chosen silence over truth came pouring out. I kissed him like I was starving. He kissed me like he didn't want to survive without it. Clothes disappeared, sheets tangled, hands roamed, skin on skin. Breath on breath. It was chaos, and it was perfect. Afterward, we lay tangled in the sheets, chest to chest, still catching our breath. He looked at me. "Tell me this isn't a mistake," he whispered. I ran my fingers down his back. "Slow, sure. It's not." He leaned in, resting his forehead against mine. "I never thought I'd let this happen," he said. "Not with anyone, especially not with you." I swallowed. "Do you regret it?" He shook his head. "Not even for a second," he said. "I'm just scared." "Me too," I whispered. The room went quiet again, but this time the silence was peaceful, like we weren't fighting anything anymore. Except maybe the world outside that door. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You're not just a friend anymore." I looked into his eyes. "I know," I said. And somehow that was enough. The next morning felt different, heavier. Not from regret, but from reality. Sunlight spilled through the half-closed blinds, casting gold across the bed. William was still there beside me, one arm slung over my chest, like he belonged there. Like it was normal. Like we hadn't just crossed a line we couldn't uncross. I didn't want to move. But I did, because I knew the second his eyes opened, the spell would break. And it did. He stirred, blinking up at the ceiling. His expression shifted, just barely. But I felt it, the hesitation. The way he slowly pulled his arm away, rolled onto his side, and let out a long, quiet breath. And just like that, silence. Not the comfortable kind, but the kind that creeps in where closeness used to live. I sat up, unsure of what to say. I didn't want to ask, "Are we okay?" Because even thinking it made me feel desperate. But saying nothing felt worse. He spoke first. "Last night was a lot." I nodded. "Yeah." He rubbed his face with both hands, still avoiding my eyes. "But I meant what I said," he continued. "You're not just a friend anymore." That should have made me feel better, but it didn't. Because he was already pulling away. We got dressed in silence, ate in silence, packed in silence, and hit the road again. But this time there were no teasing jokes or bad singing, just unfinished thoughts, and the weight of something delicate slipping away between us. By the time we stopped for lunch at a roadside diner, we were both pretending nothing had changed. The place was crowded and noisy, the kind of place where no one would notice two guys sitting in the back booth, holding something a lot heavier than a breakfast menu. William ordered pancakes. I asked for black coffee. I didn't want food. Then it happened. The moment that cracked something wide open. A guy walked in. Brandon, a friend from college. Loud, full of swagger, always the center of attention. He hadn't seen us yet, but William had. I saw him tense immediately, his back straightened, his eyes sharpened. That old mask, the one he wore in college, the one that said, "I've got nothing to hide," slipped back into place like it had never left. Brandon spotted us. "Yo, no way." "William." He crossed the room, loud as ever, punching William's arm like no time had passed. William stood, grinning like nothing had happened last night. "Brandon, man, it's been forever." They hugged, laughed, slapped each other's backs. I stayed seated. Brandon looked over. "Damn, you're here too. You guys on a trip or something?" "Yeah," I said. "Road trip." "Cheap motel, split everything," William added quickly. Brandon glanced between us, smirking. "Still the same odd couple, huh?" William laughed too hard. "You know how it is." And just like that, I saw it. Fear, not of Brandon, but of being seen, of being known. After Brandon left, after the fake smiles and empty laughs, I looked at William. He seemed smaller somehow, like someone had pulled the air out of him. "You okay?" I asked. He stared out the window. "Wasn't expecting to see anyone." I stirred my coffee. "You didn't have to lie." "It wasn't the time," he said quietly. "Is there ever going to be a right time for you, William?" That hit him hard. He didn't answer. We didn't speak the rest of the day, but the silence had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy. A wall neither of us knew how to climb. William drove, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, face set. I stared at the blur outside the window, wondering if that night had been a real beginning, or just a moment that couldn't survive daylight. That evening, we checked into our last motel before heading home. One more room, one more bed. But this time, we didn't undress. We didn't joke. We didn't even sleep close. He stayed on his side. I stayed on mine. And the space between us felt endless. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, swallowing back everything I wanted to say until I couldn't anymore. "William," I whispered, "what are we doing?" He didn't speak at first. I saw his jaw tense in the dark. "I don't know," he finally said. "I'm trying." "That's not enough," I whispered back. "Not for me." He turned, eyes wide. "You think?" "This is easy. I've been fighting myself every second since that night," William said, his voice low and raw. "I'm not asking for easy," I replied, sharper now. "I'm asking for real." His face twisted with emotion. "I'm not ready to be out," he said, almost pleading. "I don't even know what this is yet." I swallowed hard, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "I can't be the thing you reach for only in the dark." "You kissed me like I mattered," I continued. "Touched me like I meant something." "You do," he said, voice cracking. "You do." "Then show me," I demanded. "Not just when it's safe. Show me when it's hard, when it's terrifying, when it counts." He went silent too long. I sat up slowly, swung my legs off the bed. "Where are you going?" he asked, voice small. "Nowhere," I said. "Just not here." I crossed the room and sat in the chair by the window, blanket wrapped around me. I stared out at nothing, my chest aching in a way I couldn't explain. Then I heard the bed creak, footsteps. He stood beside me. "You're the first person I've ever wanted this way," he said, his voice quiet. "The first person who made me wonder if I could be more than I let myself believe." I looked up at him, my eyes wet. "Then don't run from it." He dropped to his knees beside the chair, taking my hand in his. His hand was shaking. "I'm scared of losing everything," he whispered. I squeezed his fingers gently. You might, I said, but you'll gain something too. He went quiet again, then softly, like he was asking for permission. Like what? I leaned forward, pressing my forehead to his. Like someone who loves you exactly as you are. His breath caught. We stayed like that, just being. No pressure, no pretending. And in the morning he held my hand as we checked out. He didn't let go. Not when the receptionist looked too long. Not when we walked past a group of guys laughing too loud by the door. He didn't flinch, and neither did I.